One of the things that I have learned over the years in terms of dealing and trying to address large-scale social issues is that it is imperative, it is essential that you have people with the lived experience at the table when you're trying to solve these issues. So yes, it's really critical. We don't solve their problems or the problems of our community with not including the people who are impacted by that. So I'm really pleased to introduce, I believe most people know, J.R. Clairborne, who is a former city council member currently working with Loaves and Fishes, doing phenomenal work, and he's going to talk about the impact of not having housing in this community on real live people in this community. J.R.?
All right, good morning, everybody. Oh, wow, okay, a lot of people know me. I like that. Good morning, we're all here this morning. And there are a lot of you here this morning, so I want to say thank you to those of you who came out this morning to talk about, as we say, a place for all of us, housing by choice or by chance. I was asked to speak to you this morning by drawing on my experience, as Shelley said. I'm a 20-year member of this community, I can say now, just this summer, just August. As a former member of Common Council, where I served representing the downtown for the past 10 years, and in my current stead as the advocacy coordinator for Loaves and Fishes in Tompkins County. I'm also here to speak to you because I did that one thing that as a volunteer you're not supposed to do. I said something. And I said something at the planning committee meeting, and I got a phone call later on that said, hey, we were talking about what you said, and we liked it. We liked it so much that we want you to handle that. So here I am. So today you're hearing from several people today about different areas of housing. You're hearing about government, finance, higher education, real estate, just to name a few areas. My concern is centered around who is missing. Who is missing from this list? So I have the honor this morning to introduce to you another group of folks. I call them the impacted. These are folks who are from the gap populations that Ed Marks talked about earlier. These are people who are feeling daily, more than daily in some respects, the brunt of our housing or the lack of housing choice. These are folks who come from low to middle incomes, professionals, renters, landlords, families, people reentering our community, and many more areas. In fact, we have a panel of folks this morning that I'll get to introduce to you who will share some of their stories and dealing with some of the hardships of searching for housing, searching for affordable and secure and accessible housing in Tompkins County. But first, I get to take my turn of being the messenger. In my time here, I've seen people look long and hard, and unsuccessfully at times, at finding quality housing so that they could find quality housing that they could afford and access. I've seen neighborhoods partially turn over. I've seen people pushed out of Ithaca, particularly people of color, because they simply could not afford to hold on to their housing. And not all of these folks left the area. A lot of them just moved down the road to the next municipality. Some people have been pushed as far as the next counties, our neighboring counties. The result of that is a change in the fabric and the feel of our community. There was actually, where's Gibran at? I saw when Gibran first came back to this community, he spoke at an event, and one of the things that he said, yes, Gibran, one of the things that he had remarked that's always stuck with me was that he lived here in Ithaca most of his life, and when he returned, he was really surprised to find that a number of the people that he grew up with, they were around town, but not in town. And so that really changed the dynamic of this community, that we all pride ourselves on our diversity. But when you look around, you have to ask, where is it? Unless you're at a big public event. When I first ran for office, it was the first time that I'd ever heard white people complain about gentrification. Thank you. Some of you get that. Particularly, I live in the Southside community, and that's considered at the time, was one of our most diverse neighborhoods. However, that has changed. And granted, we are still a good mix of people, But as houses come available, as people move out, it's not always black people or other folks of color who move in. The South Side is also one of the last places that the whole housing boom around town hit. So while Fall Creek had housing bids of 150, 200% of asking prices, and we watched that go around the community, the South Side is one of the last places that hit. And so ample buying opportunity for some people. And I've had people tell me about just really horrendous places that they have to call home. I've had people talk about unrepaired holes in the ceiling that lets the rain in, or during the winter, lets the cold temperatures inside. More recently, I've heard from people of varying ages dealing with infestations of bed bugs and other vermin, and not being able to get the proper help to rectify this. I had a friend who had to deal with mold on the walls of their apartments, even weeks after filing a complaint. Once that was taken care of, then they had to deal with raw sewage in their apartment, which finally led to them moving. Excuse me, let me say that differently. It led to them being helped moved. They had to stay with this stuff until someone else came to their aid. I had another friend with a disability who spent more than a year looking for a place to live. And the problem with this was she kept running into folks she needed a ramp. And people would say to her, "Do you really need that?" Thank you, Larry. You know what I'm talking about. I'm looking at Larry at Flick. Thank you, some more of you. Do you really need to have a ramp? Do you really need to have a handicap entrance? Or if you do need that, you have to put it on the back of the house. That is not a way to treat people. At Loaves and Fishes, we serve meals daily to anyone who walks through the door. Once we had a gainfully employed guest who came in one day just visibly distraught. When we checked in with her, she shared that the apartment that she had lived in for years, on a month-to-month lease, but still for years, her lease would not be renewed. This guest was worried that maybe she shouldn't have complained about that light that didn't get changed outside. Maybe she shouldn't have complained about the roaches that she couldn't get rid of. She did find housing days before the end of her time in her apartment, but in Cortland County. So again, someone else that we've lost to our community. We had another guest who's worried about becoming homeless because their prospective landlord shared that not only would they not accept their Section 8 voucher, that they had waited 3 years to get. 3 years to get on Section 8. They would not accept this voucher, but they also would not accept the deposit letter that was to cover them being able to get into this housing. And instead, the landlord, they said, wanted first and last month's rent plus 1 month for deposit. I've also been told of landlords who will not accept those deposit letters because when they have needed to call in for those to get the money to cover repairs they had to make, they were told no. Lastly, we've tried to help guests who are working towards sobriety, who have been placed in housing with known addicts. These are folks who don't want to live around what they're trying to get away from, but they know that if they refuse that housing or they turn it down, they will not have another housing option. They will not get that support to find more. Now, these are the folks who have housing. These are the folks who have housing. These are not the folks who are homeless because they just came in town, literally fell off the cabbage truck. They've had some life-altering experience due to loss of family, of job, returning from incarceration, or, as I described earlier, non-renewal of their leases. If you had to do the housing hunt around here, and maybe I should ask, how many of you have had to do look for housing in, say, in the last 5 years? Okay, good. So there are a lot of you who know that this is not an easy thing to do. And for some folks, it's really not easy to do within the next 60 to 90 days that some people have given. So this is something that, excuse me, I'm thinking of some of the other people that we have. And the thing is, it's really it's a shame because you have people who are trying to figure out how to find housing in addition to the other things that are happening in their life. These are people who are dealing with trying to regain their children, trying to gain sobriety, trying to find a job, or finding somewhere to live that's on the bus route so that they can actually keep their job. Because a lot of people, once they find housing, they're off the bus route, they're 2-3 miles out, and they can't get back in town, or they work a late shift when the buses don't run. So this is just a smattering of the situations that I'm familiar with. But there are a number of folks who actually did submit to Facebook or turned in stories to some of the others of us on the planning committee that I was asked to share. So here are some. Adson posted, I live on West State Street in an apartment that costs $800 a month for a small studio, but I can't afford to move out. I work almost 60 hours a week between 2 jobs that both barely pay the minimum wage, and I can still barely afford this place and to eat. If Ithaca made a real effort to pay its working people a living wage, it wouldn't hurt as much. But still, renters are biased towards working people and would rather have students with rich parents living in their building. I grew up in Ithaca, and it's a shame that I can't afford to live on a street renamed after a man who fought for economic equality as well as racial equality. But of course, no one ever calls it Martin Luther King Street. I do, by the way, but I follow the sentiment. Edwin posted, as for an ex-con, I've been looking for a place to call my own, and I don't get the gratitude like others do. I am treated like an outsider because of my background as an ex-felon. I'm couch hopping until my time is noticed as a human being. I am excluded as a productive citizen in society due to the past choices that I've made. I would like society to see me as a person. Angelina posted, I can tell you we are struggling, stuck in a lease for an apartment that we cannot afford, looking for one that we can. We found one out in the middle of nowhere, but hey, at least it's affordable. Of course, after setting up the appointments to sign the lease and give the security deposit, we're told Cornell actually owns the place and isn't interested in renting to anyone. It is cruel. They don't care how much life they suck out of this area and the townies, so long as the students have the housing and money pumping into their schools. It is disgusting. Deb Dietrich of OAR, let's see if Deb is in here. She shared with us that recently a female client who lives in Dryden came in looking for help with housing because she needed to get out of her current situation. She said there was visible mold throughout our room and there were holes in the ceiling and the walls in the closet. The mold was affecting her breathing and she was constantly getting sick. Shortly afterwards, another client came in who lives in the city. He said he could no longer stay at the place DSS had approved for him because there was mold in his room and he was hospitalized for breathing issues. Tammy Baker, who's our community outreach work with Family and Children Services. Hello, Tammy. She shared a story about a man who has his own checkered past, but he's trying to live life differently. And for the last 3 years, this person has lived in Ithaca, has been homeless off and on, but mostly homeless. Earlier this year, he was in rehab for 28 days. When he got back to Ithaca, DSS found him housing downtown. He stayed sober for 5 months, which was challenging because the house the house that he was in was known as the addict's house. He would find needles in the bathroom on a regular basis. During these 5 months, he was an outpatient with cars, but then he started drinking again. When he had his first unclean urine sample, he was sanctioned by DSS for 120 days with the condition that he goes back to rehab. His 120 days have gone by, but he's not gone back to rehab. So he remains homeless. He will turn 60 before the end of this year. At this point in his life, he's not interested in stopping drinking. He's had a rod in his leg and his shoulders, and he's always in pain. He would simply like a room with cable TV and books to read. Nancy posted that just wondering how much the cost of a house has gone up since 2000, and also how much in taxes, insurance, and utilities have increased. How much more does a landlord have to pay to make sure that their properties are updated and code compliant? We are all impacted by these increases, whether you own or you rent. Ithaca is a very desirable place to live, so more folks want to live here. Basic supply and demand. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try to improve the situations, because some things can't be changed. But better mass transportation and services offered outside of town would be helpful too. Anita posted, though I don't think most people are thinking of housing housing for the homeless, she puts, and assuming homeless means inability to pay rent. Affordable housing still means people who can pay something reasonable. But I'm also not sure that even affordable is possible here since taxes and expenses are so high. I don't think any of the landlords here are making a killing, but most of us are just trying to cover our expenses. And Joe posted, I took a position in Tompkins County in 2008, just as the value of my house in southern Onondaga County took a nosedive. With not much equity left to invest, we looked for a year in Tompkins County for a house in the $175,000 to $200,000 range. Sticker shock, I'm sure. And this was a house that they would have plenty, which would have been plenty of very nice house. Let me say that one more time. It would have gotten them a really nice house in Onondaga County. They found a very incredibly small inventory of homes close to their range, most of which were in tough shape and would have taken a lot of work to bring them up to par. We ended up buying one of the few new houses going up at the time, paying well above what I had expected, which eroded the pay raise that I anticipated from my new job, and had us storing our furniture, living in our son's student flat in Geneva for a few months, then a sublet in Ithaca for a few months more while the house was being finished. While we love it here, our house is great, the lack of middle-income housing was a rude awakening and put a real dent in our budget. I have to think that many families are expecting the same thing, leading them to live in places well outside the county, contributing to sprawl on a scale that is unthinkable in most counties our size. And then lastly, Larry Baum from the Computing Center shared a story that I believe Ms. Jennifer Tavares will share some similar from the Chamber of Commerce. Larry shared with us that the Computing Center has been challenged with finding adequate numbers of technical and other personnel. While this is a nationwide problem in our industry, it has been exacerbated here locally with the real housing problems that exist in Tompkins County and the outside perception that our area is overly expensive. Over the years, high local housing costs have occasionally been an issue, but it's now of great concern. In the last 18 months, we have had 3 prospective technical employees accept employment with the Computing Center, only to ultimately turn us down because of the lack of available and affordable housing in the Ithaca area. The issues have included high apartment rents and the lack of available properties within the city and town to rent. These people are all young professionals, 25 to 35 years old. They like the idea of living and working in Ithaca, but don't necessarily want to live where students live. Some have families and want to be closer to schools and other families with young children. To put this into a financial context, these aren't entry-level positions. These are mid-level positions for individuals with some experience. Salaries range from $45,000 to $65,000 annually with full benefits. Our total financial package is currently competitive with other employers in our area. So these are real-life stories, and they are plentiful. These situations do not discriminate. Today, this conversation that we're having today will give us a chance to correct the rumors, hopefully, and create some new relationships, and give us the opportunity to put goodwill into action. Our residents here are looking for affordable, accessible, and stable housing, which will help them participate and build this great community. They feel a pride in being a part of here, and they will contribute positively, like we all do. But lest any of us feel immune or otherwise secure in our current status in life, I would like to leave you with one passage. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Thank you. So, now, to do what I really came up here to do, I have 4 people that I would like to bring forward, and they're going to share with us some of their stories, some of the things that we're dealing with, some of the challenges that we're talking about that we'd like to face and combat here today.